I know how to git pull and git push. I use git merge. And when I want to impress my colleagues, I even git rebase. But there was one command I never used, git stash. I didn't know it existed until last month, and now I use it all the time. Today, I'll show you how I use git stash to make my workflow a little more efficient. I'll show you 3 scenarios where git stash can be useful, and we'll check out some subcommands that git stash offers. But first, why? Why would I ever use git stash? Well, picture this first scenario. I'm working in a repo. Right now, it just has one file, and I'm also working on a branch called new feature. And I'm in the middle of some deep work. In module, I am implementing a new feature. New feature here. All of a sudden, my boss calls and says, hey, there is a bug in the main branch. I need you to fix it. The problem is, I'm not at a stopping point. I'm in the middle of some work, and I don't want to make a temporary commit with incomplete work. So what do? This is where git stash comes in handy. If I run git stash, well, before we run git stash, let's look at our git status. You'll notice that we have modified the file module.py. Now if I run git stash, a couple of things will happen. First, the working directory will be saved, the index state will also be saved, and it'll be saved with a message called work in progress on the branch new feature, and it'll also tag the commit that I was on when I made that stash. Okay, that's a lot, but what exactly happened here? Well, when we called git stash, 2 things happened. First, the changes we had in our working directory were saved somewhere else in something called a stash. And second, the working directory was reset to the last commit. We can see that if we run git status again, now no files have been modified. If we open the file, we'll see that that new feature we were working on is gone because the directory has been reset to the last commit. Now, where is that stash? Well, we'll get to that in a little bit. Now that the directory is reset, we can simply switch to the main branch, fix the bug there, tell our boss the job is done, and then get back to our new feature branch. When we do get back to our feature branch, we want to pick up where we left off. So where is that stash? Well, if we call git stash list, we'll see a list of all the stashes or all the snapshots that we've made every time we called git stash. Right now, we just have one stash. The most recent stash has an index of 0, the next most recent stash has an index of 1, so on and so forth. And we can see a similar message. We can see the work in progress on the new feature branch and the commit we were on when the stash was made. Great. To reapply the changes to our working directory, we use another command called git stash pop. This will do 2 things. First, it will reapply the changes from the stash to your working directory, and it will remove the stash from the stash list. If we execute this, you'll see that we've got our modified module.py in our working directory again, and here's that new feature that we were working on. We can now finish it and make a formal commit. But we'll also notice that if we call git stash list, that stash is gone because that pop command removed the stash from the list. Now you may say, I don't need to use git stash. I can just make a temporary commit on my dev branch, go to main, fix everything, go back to my dev branch, and undo my last commit. Okay, well, let's see what that would look like. Let's suppose that we are in our dev branch, and we still have a modified module.py. We could make a temporary commit by saying git commit all files with the message temporary commit. And now we'll see that we have our commit made as a temporary commit right after the last commit that we had. At this point, you can jump over to main, fix the bug there, and then come back here to undo the last commit and make a formal pretty commit. But how would we do that? Well, obviously, you would use git reset soft head caret. This will do effectively the same thing. Now the head will be pointing to the commit we had before that temporary commit. And if we look at git status, we'll see that our module.py has been modified. Great. So it does the same thing. You can clean up the work and make a formal commit later. But I don't know about you. Git reset soft head caret doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. I had to look that up. Can you believe that? So instead, it's much simpler to just use git stash. Here's a second scenario where git stash is helpful. I'm back in my repo, and I'm really excited to get to work. So I just open my file, and I start coding. It's so fluffy. I'm about to make a commit when all of a sudden I realize I'm on the main branch. And that's a problem because our team prohibits making commits directly to the main branch. These changes I made should have been made in the dev branch, and I was supposed to push the dev branch to remote and open a formal pull request into main. What do I do? Well, I could undo the work that I just did. I could remove my changes, store them somewhere else temporarily, open a new branch, apply the changes to the new branch, and then continue. But that sounds like a lot of manual work. Instead, we can just use git stash. So let's use git stash here. And this time I'll show you another flag called m. This is where you can include a custom message. As before, our changes will be saved somewhere and the working directory will be reset. We can check that by looking at git status. No changes have been made. And if we look at our git stash list, here's the change in a stash. Now we can create a dev branch. On my dev branch, I can apply the changes in my stash. And that's the great thing about stashes. You can use them across branches. They're not isolated to just one branch. As before, I'll use git stash pop to apply the changes from the last stash into my working directory. And here we see that I'm on the dev branch and the file has been modified. On this dev branch, I can commit my changes, push the dev branch to the remote repo, and then open a pull request. Great. All right, one more scenario. This one's called pulling into a dirty branch. And it goes like this. I'm on my dev branch and I'm modifying the same file. More changes here. All of a sudden, your coworker says, hey, I made changes to the same file on the same branch and pushed it to remote. Can you please pull those changes and make sure it's included in your file? Okay, so I close the file and I run git pull to pull down the changes that he or she made, only to see this scary message. Your local changes to the following files, module.py, would be overwritten by the merge. Please commit your changes or stash them before you merge. Git's complaining and saying that I made changes to the file locally and the remote has changes to the exact same file. And if I try to pull the changes, there'll be a conflict between my changes and the changes on the remote repo. No problem, we can just run git stash like the message suggests. First, we'll look at the git status just to see what's going on. Here we've got a modified module. We can see the changes that are there. If we run git stash, that'll reset the working directory and save our changes into a separate stash. Now, if we look at git status, there are no changes. At this point, I run git pull to get the changes from my coworkers. And if I'm curious what they are, I can open the file and see the changes that have been made. When I'm ready, I run git stash pop again to apply my changes to the file, and if there's any conflicts, I fix them, make a commit, and push to repo. Then I can tell my coworker to pull my changes. So those are 3 scenarios where I like to use git stash. I use it when I'm interrupted and I want to save my work before making a formal commit. I also use it when I'm making changes where I'm not supposed to, like on the main branch. And it's come in handy when my dev branch is out of sync with my coworkers and I'm about to pull their changes and some conflict is about to happen. For day-to-day use, you really just need to know 2 commands. Git stash will take the changes in your working directory, save it somewhere else, and reset your working directory to the last commit. And when you're ready to reapply those changes, you can use git stash pop. But there are a few other stash commands you may find interesting. Let's just go through all the stash commands, and we'll do that by simulating a few more files and stashes. I'll start by creating a new file. This file can have anything. For now, I'll just import this. I'll save the file and close it. And if we look at git status, we can see that we have that new file not committed yet. Let's try to stash this file. I'll enter git stash and press enter, and something unexpected happens. It says no local changes to save. And that's because when we run git stash by itself, Git will only save changes to files that are tracked by Git. We can see in the git status that the new file is untracked, which is why it wasn't saved when we ran git stash. Not a problem. If we run git stash with the U flag, that will capture any untracked files and save those untracked files in the stash as well. The U stands for untracked. Just for practice, we can also include a helpful message with the M flag. And when we enter this, we'll see that the new file has been saved in the stash. We verify by looking at git status and seeing that the working directory has been reset. And if we look at our git stash list, we can see that new stash has been created here. Notice that the latest stash appears at index 0, and the previous stash we had, where we added some Python file, is at index 1. If we did make another stash, all of these stashes would move down the list and the newest stash would take index 0. What other commands are there? Well, we already saw how git stash pop will do two things. It will take the latest stash, or the stash on the top of the list, and apply it to the working directory, and it will remove the stash from the stash list. But there are some scenarios where you don't want to remove the stash from the list. Maybe you want to keep it in the stash list for the future. In that case, instead of using git stash pop, we can run another command called git stash apply. It's kind of like git stash pop in that it applies the content of the stash to the working directory, but it does not remove the stash from the stash list. Now, when I use git stash a lot, my list grows really long, and sometimes I don't want to apply or pop the latest stash, the one at the top. If I want to apply a stash deeper in the list, we can declare that stash explicitly. For example, with git stash apply, if I want to apply the stash at index 1, I simply say that by saying git stash apply stash at index 1, and that will apply the changes only from this stash to my working directory. Other times, I forget what's in the stash, and I don't want to apply changes in a stash when I don't even know what's in it. Well, there's a command to see what's in a stash as well. Instead of using git stash apply, we use git stash show, and then whichever stash we want to see the contents of. Here we have a git stat that tells us that the module.py file has been modified, and if I want to see specifically how it's been modified, I can use a git show command in patch mode with the -p flag. Here I can see exactly what changes are in the stash, and if I'm comfortable with it, I can then apply that stash. When it's time to clean up, I can remove stashes from my stash list. That's as simple as running git stash drop and then the stash that you want to remove. If I want to remove the stash at index 1, I say git stash drop stash at index 1. The stash is dropped. We can verify that by running git stash list and see that there's only one stash left. If you want to be really destructive and destroy all of your stashes, you run git stash clear, and that will remove all of your stashes. We can check that again by looking at git stash list and seeing nothing in the output. All right, I think that's about it. For day-to-day use, again, git stash and git stash pop are all you really need, but these other commands are helpful when you start using stash a bit more. I love using git stash. It's made my workflow much more efficient, and I hope it helps you as well. Until next time, happy coding.